Hello, Glenn. How's it going? I think you're the first one here today. Well, first public one. Hope you're doing well. Y'all ready to go through some more portfolios today? I think we got 5 people today. So we're gonna see how far we get. Because last time around, I think I was trying to do 5 as well, but we ended up only doing 4. So let's see how far we get this time. Hey Henrik, welcome. How's it going? Joe Bates is here as well. Nice to see you here, Joe. We're gonna be starting out with your portfolio today. Glenn is asking how I'm doing. Thank you so much for asking, Glenn. I'm doing great. I had... How should I describe this? I had fun. Going back to like my old geometry node setup. Like my old geometry setup when it comes to like my trees, right? So for my scene that I've been making, I have like a tree set up in like Blender geometry nodes, and I've been going back into it and kind of like trying to clean it up while also trying to like optimize certain points. So it's like a stereotypical case of like, oh my god, what did like previous Dim do? And I'm trying to like decipher what I did at like an earlier stage, and hopefully that I can like optimize and like improve on it now. So that's what I mean with fun, you know? It's wasn't really that fulfilling yet, but hopefully this will pay off in the end. Because the trees in the scene don't look great. We need to update. And honestly, I've been putting it off for such a long time. I should have done this for like ages ago, honestly. But we're here now, and that's what matters. Hello, Antonio. Hello, Snowbat. Antonio with a different YouTube account. Interesting. How are you both doing? So yeah, I've been playing around with like the new geometry nodes as well. I've updated it to Blender 4.0 as well. So I'm kind of like discovering what the new nodes are, if any. But it seems to be like way quicker, just from like the couple of hours of exploring that I did. It needs to be like way quicker, way more responsive. So yeah, been pretty good. Hello, Jordy, Yusuf, ZKR25. Hi, bonjour. How are you all doing? Yeah, that's been pretty fun. I hope that I can get to a stage where I can kind of clean up the whole thing so that I can make like a bunch more trees with it. And then also hopefully, I don't know how far we're gonna get with this, but I'm hoping that we can also make bushes with it, but I don't know. I don't know if that will be feasible. I think what we might do is we're just gonna duplicate like the geometry node setup that we have for the trees, and then we're gonna kind of repurpose that and kind of cut out all the fluff that we don't need for bushes and like kind of repurpose it into like a new tool. I think that's what we're gonna do. The same YouTube channel, just change the name, as it will release a podcast later. Oh, interesting. Hey, Alejandro. Oh, hello. Okay, so got a lot of portfolios to look at today. So I'm gonna switch over in just a second. Let me make sure that the audio is a little bit better balanced, and then we can go ahead. Okay. Oh, the chat is in the way. It's not good. Move that up a little bit. There we go. Okay, cool. So, welcome everybody. Let's start with our first portfolio review of the evening. As always, like I try to have like a stereotypical like format that we can kind of follow through, even though like ArtStation is kind of changing their format, so we'll see how that adjusts. But what I'm firstly gonna do is always a step of like seeing how the title is reflected in the work, right? So we got freelance 3D artist. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of 3D stuff in here. I think in your case, Joe, it's probably to reflect that you're open to like a lot of opportunities, not only like environment art, right? But most what I'm seeing seems to be more catered towards your love for full environments rather than your love for individual props. So it might be best to just double down on that, and make it like really specific. So it's kind of like a keyword, right? If people know that you're an environment artist, you're saying that, hey, look, I'm interested in the bigger stuff. I can also do individual props, but I'm more interested in working on like the bigger stuff. So that would be like a small thing that I would just say here, because depending, I think in the UK and in the US especially, if you call yourself like a 3D artist, that is like a really broad term, right? Like you could apply to ArcFizz or yeah, like ArcFizz or VFX or whatever else, right? Like an environment artist is a bit more specific to games. So I would probably change that up. Then let's have a look here. Recently graduated from Vertex School. I aim to create compelling environments that tell an interesting story. Yeah, if you say that, especially, just call yourself an environment artist. It's way more catchy, right? In that case. So just, yeah, go with that. Right? And then let's have a look at the work here. First impression, pretty good, right? Like a couple of environments here. I also like that the environments are different, right? Like you're trying to sell yourself as an environment artist that can do like different styles, or not necessarily styles, but like topics, right? We have like a more like a castle, and then we have like an interior like Victorian Art Deco kind of style, and then something like futuristic, right? It's something that is you're both exploring like the stuff that you really like, but you're also showing that you can have like diversity in the range of skills that you have as well, which is really good. Hello, McVal. It's nice to see you here. So yeah, that is really good. I think thumbnails overall look quite nice. This might be like a leftover legacy thing from ArtStation, but you have like this little black border, right? Maybe it was supposed to match like the border from ArtStation that it had before. I don't really think that it matters too much if you have the border or not, to be honest. I think if you want to do something more special with your presentation, I think you have to take it like a step further. Just, yeah. Rather than just like a pretty uniform border. So yeah, you can either like blend it in with like the colors of ArtStation, right? Or you could possibly have a different kind of frame. It'd be interesting. I added them all. Oh, I added that. I think it was to separate the images when viewing them all. Oh, okay. Yeah, because they get quite close to each other, right? Let's actually have a look at someone else's portfolio to see. Okay. Yeah. I think if you want to do that, then try to sample the color that's the background from ArtStation, right? So that it kind of blends in with the thematic of it. Oh, fair enough. This was before the update. Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, I think if we then look at the portfolio again, if we look at the thumbnails, right? I think The one that I'm least interested in checking out is definitely this one. Right, so I wonder if this is like a case where we can do some tweaks to it and still include it in the portfolio, or if this is going to be a case where we have to remove it from the portfolio. We'll see. I'll have a look at it. Overall, there's like a really nice cadence to your work, right? Like there's a progression in the work that is really nice to see, especially because you're playing more with contrast and light in this one, which is pretty cool compared to some of the more other ones where you can see that the lighting could use some tweaks, right? That being said, let's dive in. I'm probably just gonna start with this one then. Let's just have a look. It's from last year. That's the high poly. Okay. This is an interesting choice for render. I think what would be more effective if you just have like the clock and just like rotating it. Like either rotate the clock or like rotate the lighting setup or something, right? So that you get like the nice roughness variations. Because the thing that you're running into here is especially this part, right? Where we kind of see the top section of the assets when you're doing like a very closed in shot. You're also highlighting that you don't have enough geometry on the top end. Especially compared to like all the rest, right? Like the rest of the surfaces look like pretty clean in terms of like the amount of geometry that you have for them. So it makes these edges like stand out a lot as well. And that's something that you have when you push your camera like really close to a prop. You have to be aware that people will scrutinize you on those details as well. For example, another detail is this curve compared to this curve, right? They're different. So you can kind of see that this curve kind of tends to come to a stop here, but this curve like kind of cuts that one off at a certain point. It's small details like that, right? That kind of make the presentation when you push your camera so close to the details, like people are gonna scrutinize you on those details as well. The presentation itself is really nice, you know, like very clean. I like that you have like the wireframe. It's very readable as well, which is really cool. I think the lighting setup here can definitely be like improved. Think about like a 3-point lighting setup, even though it's like super stereotypical, like it's a reason why it's like the standard form, right? Because it highlights certain aspects of your prop. And it allows you to like really highlight the roughness variation as well. Even though, let's see, I think you have some of it going on because there's like a rim light as well. I think you just have to like balance the values of the different lights a little bit better compared to each other. This is cool. What I would also do is always start out with the main image where you really sell the asset, right? Because I think in this render we kind of jump into like the breakdown immediately, where I kind of want to see you sell the prop to me, right? Like what is where can we find this prop? Who owns it? Like build a little bit of a story, right? And really sell it to us rather than immediately jumping into the breakdown. Because like the content of the breakdown is really good, right? But I think what we're missing is just let me actually make some notes as well. So one would be the details, right? Like attention to details. Probably not number 1, but we're going with that order. Number 2 would be sell the prop first, right? Sell the prop first, and then number 3 would be to show textures as well. So textures plus UVs, right? That's what you want to have in a breakdown like this. Yeah. Overall, there's stuff that I could say about the quality of the prop as well, but I think for this one we're gonna stay more with like the actual presentation of the portfolio, right? We're gonna kind of stick with that. So that's what I would say about this piece. Focus a little bit more on the details, like sell it to me, like build a kind of story to it. Use that as the main image as well, and then add textures and show the UVs as well. But the rest of it, like the stuff that you're showing off here already, looks quite clean in the way that it's presented. So yeah, great job on that. Let's have a look. Let's just jump around a little bit. Small project created as a mock art test. Cool. Let's see. World War II. Interesting. Okay. There's like a keyword in here, which is very, very interesting for games, right? Like in games, we don't tend to use UDIMs like at all. So yeah, this seems to be more catered towards VFX then, right? Or like the film industry. So that's why it's oftentimes useful to like read the description as well. Gotta say, I love that, like a miniature but real. Yeah. Yeah, this is cool though. Presentation is good, right? Like we have like the main images. You're trying to sell it first, without turning it into a breakdown immediately. I think if you wanted to, maybe not in this case because you're using UDIMs, right? Well, even then, right? I think the same thing still applies as well, where it would be kind of interesting to just see the breakdowns, right? Like what's the wireframe look like? Number 1 would be breakdown. And I think that kind of, it's just taking the breakdowns, like the sort of breakdowns that you were doing before on your other prop, right? And then just adding like the textures and UVs to it. And then you have like a really solid breakdown as well. I think the presentation can definitely be taken a step further as well, where I kind of appreciate that you're kind of putting it on like a little miniature. Could actually be, let's see. Yeah, because that's actually a thing that Scott brought up, right? It kind of feels like a miniature because it kind of has like the little pedestal that like a miniature comes on with. Like that's my initial impression of this, right? But if that's not your intended feel, then making it so that it actually feels more like it's just embedded within the environment, right? Where you have like dirt tracks and like you can see people moving around and like mud steps and all that kind of stuff, and it's less of a circular thing, but it's actually like it has like a little dirt edge to it, right? I was kind of aiming for the scale model thing first though. Yeah, okay. So if that is your intent, I think you can also push that a little bit further by using like a really strong depth of field on your camera as well. What is the trick again? Because like if you use like in photography, it's called like a tilt shift method. and it's actually kind of like a very common technique used to make real life things look like miniatures as well. So I'm just gonna write that down here. Build shift photography. It's gonna be very interesting. Since you're a community member as well, there's actually like a tip that I did on this actual method and how you can get that inside of Unreal as well. It's really cool if you want to make something feel like a miniature. But the base itself does it as well. But I think that's a great start. Now then, on the presentation, I think the main thing is just like improving the presentation itself, right? Like really try to sell it to me. Like if you're doing like a scale model thing, like really make it feel like a scale model thing. You could even have like what could be interesting is if you have like a bunch of unpainted props like right next to it, right? Like just like a bunch of, I don't know, whatever you can find from Megascans, and just slap like a very plasticky like gray material on it, right? So that you're really trying to convince me and sell the feeling to me that, hey, look, what you're looking at right now is a scale model thing, right? It'd be very cool. So that would be like the third thing, right? Like it's if you come up with an idea, like really try to sell it and like really like it's becoming a bit repetitive here, right? Like I'm not coming up with like good words to say it in a different way, but like really do like a deep dive into it and see what makes like a miniature look more unique compared to the rest of the presentations, right? Jerome is saying some real life props like paint tubes and things scaled down to real world to contrast the point to it. Yep, that could be awesome as well. That's a great point. So yeah. Yeah, and then the breakdowns. The breakdowns are going to make like a huge difference as well. Let's keep on going. Hey, Jacob Clausen. Shout out to Jacob. Got an acid kit here. See, this is the good stuff, you know? Like, this is the stuff that we can really dive into. Ivy created using Poly? Is that like an add-on or something? Water shader graph. Okay. Branches. We got like a modular kit as well. Let's actually have a look here. Pixel bridge. Yeah, I assume so. Oh, X normal. Cool. Oh, okay. Yeah, if like making it sound like it's an add-on, you know, with this little thingy, like using polygons. I think it's probably better to like say something like nanite. I'm assuming if this is like polygons, then you're probably using nanite as well for the ivy, right? Or if not, then you can say something like ivy using 100% geometry or something like that, just to make it 100% clear. Yeah. No, this is pretty interesting, you know. I think there's a lot of easy wins that you can get by just adding more layering to it, right? If we talk about like the actual art itself, it kind of feels like it's almost like The Witness. I don't know if you ever played the game, but it kind of has like a very stylized feel to it because the color is just pretty uniform. It does have a very interesting style, but then it kind of doesn't really blend that well with like the very realistic foliage that you have comparing the two. Yeah. I think the breakdown is good, right? The breakdown is good. Like you're doing texture breakdowns and stuff as well. Like you have this screenshot here for additional context, which is good. This stuff is all great. I'm assuming that the ivy wasn't created manually, right? Like it looks like photo scanned, and because you have like Quixel Bridge in here, it's probably gonna be like Quixel Bridge or Quixel Mixer or something like that. Just because I saw Scott asking that question as well. Yep. It's cool though. I like the color contrast, right? Even though like it's very it's very what would you say? Like it's very stylistic. Like it's a very stylistic contrast between the two. I think I baked an image to Geo. Interesting. Okay. So that's cool, right? If you're doing that stuff, show it off. Right? Like those little interesting like workflow tips or like workflow things that you did that you think are less ordinary, like try to show those off, right? Like your portfolio is about like selling yourself and your skills, right? So those things could be really interesting. Look here. This is cool. Like I said, we're seeing like a clear progression, right? Oh, this chair looks cool. Circular one. Props and paintings created using AI. So I'm assuming that you're talking about like the paintings and like this little prop here, right? Sometimes you have to be like very careful with the wording of it, right? Because if I'm working on assumptions at this point, right? So I know that like these props are not made with like AI, right? You probably put in like a lot of time and effort yourself. However, like you're just saying here, props and paintings created using Midjourney AI, and like all that's on this page are props and paintings, right? So be very careful with the wording of it, and maybe even like separate them out. I know that currently there's also like a heavy connotation with using AI, right? I personally, I have my own opinions on it. I'm not gonna like infuse them into the conversation here. But I think it would still be good right now to make sure that there's like a clear difference between like the props that you made and where you use like the help of AI, right? Just to make that difference. Because worst case for you, like people could make the assumption that all of this stuff, like all the textures and everything is made with AI and you only did like the modeling, for example. And you probably don't want to have that, right? Let's see. The environment itself is looking pretty good though. I like it. There is definitely some stuff that you can do with the lighting, right? It's like a very like stereotypical, like almost midday kind of lighting that's currently going on. There's a lot more that you can do with looking at like color contrasts and what colors work really well together. And also like making sure that we have like a focal point, right? Because currently, like it kind of feels like there is no real focal point. There is nothing here that you're trying to lead us to that tells us a bit more about like the environment that we're currently looking at, right? So it is kind of just, it is a hallway, right? It is like it's like a set piece for a certain time, but it's just a hallway. Like I want to see like a little bit more, like who lives here, you know? It can be relatively simple. It doesn't always have to be like a very obnoxious story, but something a little bit more, right? So a focal point is definitely going to help you with that. Number 2 is descriptions, right? Be very careful with descriptions, like we talked about before. I know that I'm being like very specific about this, but it's the reason why I'm being so specific is because people might think the same that I just said out loud, but they're not going to say that to you, right? And if that then eventually means that you lose like a job opportunity over it, that would suck, right? So yeah, be very clear, be very specific with things. Make sure that everything is 100% clear. Let's see, so we got some tilables here. Using Substance Designer, that's cool. Adding wood plank texture as well. Nice. Got some vegetation here. With this one, I think you might want to be careful with how you present this. I don't know if this is like a 2x1 texture, right? Where you're using like a 2K by 1K texture sheet to then have like all your vegetation on. Because if that is the case, then we're dealing with like a whole bunch of empty space over here, right? Which is just unused at the moment. So, yeah, that would be interesting if that's the case, right? Because it's 2 different textures. Yeah. If it is, then make sure that that's like clearly visible, right? And also make sure that, for example, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the plant here. Oh, I don't want to do. It's just. It is. So. Okay. Yeah, I see. So if you have space here, right? Like, let's assume, I mean, you just said that these were 2 different textures, right? So this is going to be square texture. Even on this one, like, we're still losing like a bunch of space over here, especially where you could have easily like put in like another of those sections with like a little bit of variation. And then you could have like a more interesting looking plant because of it, right? Or even squish in 2 of these guys and then 2 of these guys, right? So that you get like a little bit more variation in your plant. So yeah, it's more about like optimizing the amount of resources, right? And it's a combination of optimization and presentation. Right? Because we're having a conversation here right now, right? Which is freaking awesome. You telling me that it's 2 different textures gives me like a whole bunch of different contexts to then know like, okay, we can do like a couple of simple tweaks here. But a guy looking at your portfolio, like a person looking at your portfolio doesn't know that additional context, right? So putting that on there is going to be very helpful. Usually what helps is if you just have like the UV square, right? And just have that on there. So that you have like a little outline. It'd be very helpful with this. What I would also do is adding the context to it, right? So in your little presentation that we have here, so imagine that this little section that I just drew is your image. I would have like your textures here, right? And then the asset over here. so that we can kind of see like, oh, this is the texture for this asset. That's awesome. And maybe instead of only using the base color, then you can have like your base color, your roughness, yeah, and other textures that you use. Probably not anything interesting in the metallic, right? Yeah, for normal. And then maybe some like additional pointers on like the try count and stuff, right? So that each image kind of becomes like a standalone presentation of what you're trying to present there, right? What I love is that you're very upfront about the stuff that you did, right? And how you approached it. I think it's just thinking about like the packaging and wrapping it in like a nice package. That's definitely gonna set it apart. So that's it for this one, I think. Oh, the same can also be applied here, right? Like the thing that you're doing here is great, right? Where I can see the base color, the normal, the roughness, and the AO, and it is kind of clearly indicated that it is, which is great. Even though like there seems to be like a lot of AO information. I'm gonna be nitpicky here, right? There seems to be like a lot of AO information for barely any normal information, which is kind of weird, right? Because if you have a lot of AO, that indicates that there's like a higher difference between surfaces, which is usually something that we try to fake with a normal. So that could be something to think about. My point was that the actual presentation here of having like the division is really good. You can just like lift it up to the next level by having the context next to it, right? Like having the prop right next to it, or maybe like a zoomed in shot of like the floor in this case would be awesome. Yeah, like a zoomed in shot of the floor that still has like a bit of the carpet in it to kind of give it like some extra flavor for the presentation. That would be great. I would love that. Yep. Yeah, and like I said, playing around with the time of day, figuring out like a full like a focal point, telling a little bit more of a story, and then paying more attention to the presentation is really well, the first couple of points are more something that you could easily take into your next projects. And then the last couple of points you could definitely already do on the projects that you currently have on your portfolio as well. Hi Z! How do we get our portfolios reviewed? So currently we're dealing with a backlog of people that are still waiting to get their portfolio reviewed. So the best way to get your portfolio reviewed or get in line is becoming a member. And then we have like a channel that you can post your portfolio in. So yeah, if you just head on out to our website and become a member, that's the quickest way currently. Let's have a look. And then we've got this one. Yep, we kind of talked about this one a lot already, right? I mean, we kind of saw the progression of it, right? This is cool. Where you got like the POM decals outlined. That is pretty sweet. Like that. That's good. I think what you could do here is to bring it to the next level is have like a GIF that kind of switches between the two, where you have like POM decals on and POM decals off. And it's kind of just like a quick loop of just like 1 second with, 1 second without. The progress GIF, you got some decal sheets. All looking great. So obviously for something like this, it gets a little bit trickier to show off like all like something more unique, but I think something you have on here is presented really well. Sheet material. I can't believe that you didn't rename the parameter here. Come on, man. I'm just kidding. Nope, this is looking good. Yeah, I think you could take like a lot of inspiration from Doom. So they kind of have like the same sort of setup, right? And it's kind of very similar, but like the way that they show off like all the different layers that they have is very, very interesting. And I think you can kind of like take inspiration from that too. Oh, and thanks for the shout out as well. Yep. I think this is good, you know? I think this is good. Just like more gifts. I mean, in this case, right? Because we're trying to make a comparison with and without POM. I think that's always going to be very interesting to see. Yeah. I mean, with or without POM is going to be like a little bit tricky, right? But just having like this outline and this overlay be a bit more saturated, right? Where it's a bit more intense, but then switching between on and off could be the way to go for this guy. Cool. So we kind of talked about like a lot of stuff, right? Hey, Kevin Brunt, finally getting some time to catch one of these streams. That's awesome. Welcome, welcome. We're just gonna do like a little recap here. So let's have a little summary, right? I think there's a lot of really interesting, especially quick wins that you can do, especially on the presentation department, right? Especially on the presentation from the breakdown perspective, right? There's a lot of wins, like a lot of stuff that's kind of missing currently. That you could definitely like incorporate into your breakdowns and then have it be like way more transparent, way more clear, especially when it sometimes comes to descriptions as well. I think it's like you were saying before, right? Like you tend to kind of skip the presentation, which I get. I've done my part, but I think once you start realizing that the presentation is actually the thing that lures people in and then helps people stay longer as well, because if you do like a really good breakdown, that's something that people gravitate towards as well, because other people will want to see how it's broken down. And it's also interesting for like a person in a recruitment position to then look at your work and see what the steps are that you took to get to that point, right? So it kind of works in both ways. But that would definitely be like a big win. I think in most of your work, right, it's the focal point is a door, but there's nothing like, especially in these two, right? There's nothing really happening there. So I think if you want to elevate like your portfolio to the next level, having something that then also incorporates like a story into it that can then be highlighted with like a focal point is gonna make your work like way more interesting than it currently is. It's also something that as an environment artist you're going to be doing a lot of, right? For example, my time as an environment artist on the games that I worked, well, especially Far Cry, for example, was wouldn't like, let's say 70 to 80% like either trying to tell a story or trying to build some sort of logic into the space that would then later on support the story. So don't underestimate like how important like a story to it is. And like I said before, it doesn't have to be like an elaborate thing, right? You can just have a story that kind of revolves around like the person living in this mansion and just leaving like a couple of personal memorabilia around, right? Like small little props and then highlighting them. That could kind of give like a little indication of what his day-to-day looks like, and then you leave the rest up to the imagination, right? So number 2 would be storytelling, like some sort of storytelling. would be awesome to see, especially in the bigger environments. And then number 3, I would probably point out to... let's see. I think if you really want to make yourself a bit more versatile, right? And if that's still something that you're interested in, what you could do is also add like a unique prop to your portfolio again. But I do have to say, like, I get the impression that you're like way more interested in making environments. So that's why I'm kind of hesitant of putting it on there. But I still want to give you that context, right? But that would be something I would be interested to see, like an individual prop that you can use as like a showcase of like, hey, look, I'm really good at the big picture, but if I need to, I can also do like a kick-ass chair or something like that, right? Yeah, that would make your portfolio like more well-rounded as well, if that is something that's really interesting to you. And then lastly, I think looking back at like all the environments, right? There's definitely like some quick wins that you can do on the portfolio side, on the thumbnail side of things. Especially if we're getting some quick wins. What I like to do, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, so you kind of have to like kind of feel it for yourself, right? Is a thing where I'll zoom in on like a specific detail, like a detail shot for an environment, right? Or something that I would recommend. And then once you click on the thumbnail, it becomes like the open environment, right? So you're kind of trying to sell them with like a detail and then opening up with like, whoa, this is a whole scene. This is awesome. And then you can do like all the breakdowns and show more of the whole thing. That's the way that I would approach it. Like I said, it doesn't really work with everything, right? I think, especially if you're working with trim sheets and reusable stuff a lot, your options are much more limited. But I would say that on this one, I can definitely see like opportunities to do that. So that would be interesting to try out. Joe Bates is saying, I just screenshot my work every so often and I make a GIF later. Probably not the best way though. Oh, no, for those GIFs, like progress GIFs, I think that's good, right? Oh, sorry, Simon, I skipped over your question. So how do you practically make those progress GIFs from one camera view in the engine? Yeah, it's just like Joe said. Just screenshot your work like every so often. Yeah, like it's basically once you establish like your camera view, you just take like a screenshot every day, and then just there's like a website called Easy GIF where you just dump all those images and it makes like a nice GIF for you, and then you're done. And then Brandoom is coming in and saying, on the door thing, I like seeing open doors personally. I mean, you can't see what's fully on the other side, but it implies there's more to the world. Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing, right? Like, I think that goes into like the storytelling and focal point side of things, where if there was something more why the door could be open, like a hint at something happening there, that could definitely like elevate it to like the next level. But that's a good point. So yeah, Joe, I would say like there's a lot of easy wins with your presentation and the way that you broke things down, right? Like all the minute details from the descriptions to like how everything's presented is going to make like a massive impact. Then for going forward, like thinking more about storytelling as like a foundational piece in your environments, then maybe picking like a showcase prop from one of your previous environments or building an environment around a showcase prop for your next one is kind of going to satisfy like both ends, right? Where we know that you can do like the full environment, but then also showcase that you can do like the smaller individual prop too. And then improving the lighting and like improving the lighting and the way that you showcase your thumbnails. So I would say 1 and 4 are going to be like easy to implement. I would recommend doing them on most of your work currently. And then 2 and 3 is something that you just take to the next step. Last thing, I know we've been going pretty long this time around, but it's all good. I would say that this one is on the edge right now to me. Like this prop over here. I think you have to do some work on the presentation and like really bringing like the texture quality and the asset quality up. Like the texture, asset, and lighting quality to the next level to keep it on your portfolio or like really sell that you can focus on an individual prop. If you don't want to do that, which I totally understand, then I would probably consider like removing it from your portfolio because currently that's the weakest piece. And you know that as well, right? Because that's why it's last on your portfolio. Yeah, work towards replacing it with something else. That would be my recommendation. Quite close to removing it. That's good. Awesome to hear. Yeah, thanks so much for putting your portfolio up for review as well, Joe. Best of luck with the next project. I'm curious to see what you're building next. And yeah, give me a shout out if I can give you some feedback sometime. Let me know. Awesome. Thank you. No worries. Thank you. Oh, Goose is late to the party. Welcome, Goose. Okay. Take a sip of water. What did everyone else think of the portfolio? Like of Joe Bates' portfolio? Oh, let me make sure that that I say this as well, right? Because I tend to glance over it. But the work that you have on display, Joe, is very good already, right? Like there is like a passion that I can tell that you bring to the table, and it kind of translates into your environments. So yeah, great stuff. Keep it on going. Keep improving. Embed that storytelling in there, and that's really gonna bring it to like the next level. Leonardo is saying avoid square rooms. Yeah. I mean, they're technically not square, right? They're rectangle, but I get what you mean. I think honestly, I would be more in the same opinion if the room itself wasn't interesting, right? Let's take an example at like my old sci-fi tunnels that I made, right? Where it's just like a square that you kind of try to make it look interesting, but it never works because it's still just a square. I think there's a lot more going on here. Like, attention has been paid to like all the surfaces. So, well, I get your opinion. It's not something that I necessarily agree with, like in the current context. Really liked following the hydroponic scene, says Sarah. Yay, it was awesome. All right, cool. Next one up, Lazar. Oh, 3D environment artist. That's good. Aspiring 3D environment artist who loves creating cool nature environments. Aside from that, I absolutely adore Substance Designer. It's definitely my favorite one, like #1 favorite project to use and mess around with. That's cool. This is like an ever ongoing debate whether you add aspiring or not in there. I kind of go back and forth. I feel like sometimes it's kind of selling yourself short, but it's up to you. Like, you can also just change it as soon as you have your first job, you know? That would also be fine. Got like environment art in here. Let's have a look. Okay. I was kind of gonna have like a quick glance at the materials here, but then this graph kind of struck me, and like I can't read anything. So this, I think this is a point where this, for just being very brutal about it, right? Like I don't think this screenshot like adds anything to your portfolio. I think if you could break it down into like sections, or maybe have it like condensed into like one image, right, where you can see like the whole graph and it's kind of like interesting to look at, then I would keep it. But this doesn't really add anything. Very long time ago. It's all good. Oh, you're talking about the materials themselves? So I think, in my opinion, like if you're already doubting that if you should keep them or not, that's like an indication that you should actually remove them. Because I think there's kind of always like the self, like how self-critical you are, right? But that's like, in my opinion, the way that I've always felt about it. If I was just like already doubting what I felt about it, it was probably like a good indication that other people would be like, yeah, this probably can go, you know? Love seeing stylized work. Hell yeah, Kevin. Yeah, we're gonna dive into some of this stuff up here first, or like in a bit. We'll see cobblestone. I think I had a quick look at your portfolio before, right? So I think I want to make a comparison with all this stuff and then what you're currently doing, right? Because these ones, they are like on a different level, right? When you have to compare them purely on like a material basis, like these ones are like way ahead of its league, right? In comparison. And the reason why I say that is because these are becoming like way more readable, right? Like we can actually like define the shapes, and there's actually like a nice contrast between the two. I'm especially like a big fan, of the grass over here. It looks so nice. You know, like nice and flowy stylized grass with some flowers in it. So good. But yeah, I think when you're doing this already, right? I think it's honestly time to remove like all of this stuff down here. Let's see. Yeah, see, because it becomes very hard to read like what it's actually trying to be, right? Especially again compared to these guys. This is good stuff. Yeah. That's an easy decision for me. Like I would honestly like remove the older ones and just purely rely on this one. Let's take it step by step. Hey Daniel! Oh, and Brand Doom was still making a comment about Joe Bates' work, like loving the contrast between the hard surface sci-fi and foliage. Yeah, that's always works, right? The contrast between something like very man-made, something that's like very natural, always looks really good. Stylized rocks. So this is like a pack. Other game ready? Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. Oh, and then I guess later on it kind of got replaced by these guys then, right? Is it 2 months ago? Yeah, I think this is definitely more catered towards like selling of a product rather than, hey, I'm putting like the display of my skills on I'm putting my skills on display here, right? So yeah, this is an interesting one because I think this is the first time that we ran into like a portfolio review that kind of blends these two together, right? Um I think honestly, like your new pack, it does it way better. Where you have like the nice banner, and then you have like the breakdowns as well, right? Like the LOD showcase, you have like the UV showcase, um, texture variation, like all that kind of stuff. This is like way better presented than the older pack here. There is still some value to it, right? Like that we can see your sculpt and like your texturing. But yeah, I would ideally, if you want to, this is a tricky one, right? Because you kind of want to make a decision whether you just keep it as like a sales pitch. But I think, in my opinion, what works best if you make something that looks really great from like an artistic perspective, and then you use that as like a selling piece to then link in your product. So, because right now this is like very cut and dry. I don't know what I'm gonna do with these rocks. I don't know how they're gonna be placed together. Even with the current one, right? I don't know how they work together. It's kind of like very abstract at this point. So making sure that you build something with it yourself and then use that as like a sales pitch to get people to potentially buy into the product as well. Kind of like a little bit of a tangent here, but I kind of feel like these ones are sales pitches rather than portfolio work, if that makes sense. Let's see. This one we've obviously looked at together multiple times. Yeah. Presentation is quite good. We got like a vertex paint setup here as well. It's nice. This is cool. Little nice rock presentation, like in the actual environment. That's awesome. Rock shader breakdown. That's great as well. Love that. Same thing here. This all looks good. I think the main thing that we're missing here. Oh, okay. This is interesting. Let me have a quick look here. Looks fine there. So it's interesting, right? What I'm seeing here is that there's a lot of issues with your normal maps and your bakes. This is usually an issue where you have wrongly assigned hard edges in areas that you don't necessarily need hard edges, or the opposite, right? Where something has soft edges where it's supposed to have hard edges. That's why we're currently also getting like these really weird like normal artifacts, right? And you can also see that in the color of the normal as well. Like you can see that like even on these splits, right? Let's see. Kind of hard to tell, right? So the stairs, the pillars. I'm gonna make the assumption that these are like all separate UV islands. I mean, we're kind of going into like the art, right? But if there are separate UV islands, they also need to be hard edges as well. I should probably sort that out soon. Yeah, I think honestly, like this isn't even like an export issue. I think this is like a baking issue. So yeah. Gotta be very careful with that, right? Because from like a recruitment perspective, like seeing like a gradient like this on a flat surface, right? Because this is like one edge of a pillar, indicates that you still need to have like some loading to do when it comes to like baking normal map out of something. And again, like I know that I'm laying it all out here, right? And I'm being very blunt about it too. But it's something that I would definitely fix. Like you're saying already, probably should sort that out soon. 100%. What I do like though, like the presentation itself, right? Being very transparent about like, hey, look, these are the textures. This is how the UVs are laid out. This is how many tries you have. Like all the information is there, right? So awesome job on that. It's great that you're being super transparent about it. I love it. So definitely some points for that. Yeah, what you could do, for example, right? If we're thinking about like the presentation here, is potentially think about like this sort of presentation, but then also doing your breakdowns in the same sort of formula, right? Where you zoom in on like a little barrel here, right? You have your little barrel here, and then you just have like your textures all over the place here, maybe your try count here, that sort of stuff, right? Because I mean, I'm being again very specific, but I like seeing something that's like in context and the actual environment rather than seeing it in a way where everything is like pretty dry on like a black background, right? Just adds a little bit more flavor to it. And it kind of keeps the renders consistent, right? Because I love what you're doing here. Like all this stuff looks really good. Yep. Yeah, no, this is a great post. Apart from what we brought up, right, in the breakdowns. Great post. Presentation is good. Like the breakdowns here are awesome. Love to see that. Showcasing that you can do technical stuff as well. Yeah. Awesome job on this one. We're not really gonna look at like the Beyond Extend stuff, right? Obviously it's like a little bit too close to my heart. Let's have a look here. Gonna be very honest, like this one can just go. Oh, this is cool. Like a little happy animation. I honestly don't think that this holds up on your portfolio compared to like the rest of it. It is it has like the very stereotypical trope of having like the blue sci-fi color slapped on top of it, right? Yeah, that was a very random project. Yeah, yeah. It is, right? And you can kind of tell. And I can also kind of tell that you I can also kind of tell that you kind of had fun with it too, right? But I don't think like little experimentations and little random projects are at home on your portfolio. Like your portfolio should be like the best stuff, right? What you could do, however, is instead of making the differentiation between materials, characters, props and assets and environments, right? You just make it that you have your main page, which has all your best stuff, and then you you just say like, let's say environments, and then you have like experiments or older work or something like that. That gives like a clear indication that this is not the stuff that you want to push in your portfolio, right? But it's just like fun stuff that you're doing on the side. I'm a bit afraid of taking those down since it will make the portfolio feel a bit empty. Empty portfolio with like a couple of pieces that are good is still going to be better than a full portfolio with pieces that are not going to be convincing anyone. This is why people say like your portfolio is as good as the worst piece on it. Because now for a lack of a better word, right? Like people that are going to be visiting your portfolio, you're going to be like, "Oh, this stuff looks cool." Oh, but oh my god, look at this little golem here, right? And it's gonna like drag down the rest of your work because people are gonna remember like the worst pieces on your portfolio comparatively to the other ones. And Adam is saying a portfolio with one stellar piece is better than a mediocre portfolio. Yeah. Yep. Yep. 100%. So, like, I would honestly be really happy to see these 4 pieces by themselves compared to all the stuff that's below it. 100%. 100%. Like Kevin is also saying, quality matters more. Like a few pieces or even one incredible piece can get you a job rather than a ton of mid-level work. Yep. 100%. Yeah, so like I said, like I would be happy like seeing the top 4 and the rest of it can all go. I know this is like a very direct way of saying it, right? But that's something that you just have to kind of get used to, right? That your portfolio is only as strong as your weakest piece. Yep. 100%. Thanks for chiming in as well, people. It is tough, right? Because we attach so much of like our personal value to like the art that we do. And I get that it's rough, especially the first time when you kind of have to make that cut, right? And be very objective about your own work. It's not an easy thing to do. It's definitely not. Randoom is saying, I struggle with this too. I want to show my paintings and stuff somewhere, just not on the front page of my portfolio. Yeah, like random stuff that you do on the side. It kind of depends how much relevancy it has to your portfolio, right? And it depends on how much you do of that stuff. Sometimes it's better to post some of it on your blog posts, right? If it's done on like a regular basis. If not, maybe just having a tab that says older work and you just push like most of the old work in there. That would be fine too. And you could kind of use that in like a very tactical way, right? The way that I used it before I decided to drop ArtStation Pro was whenever you landed on my portfolio, you would only see my personal work, not my professional work. Because my personal work was always more catered towards the big environments rather than the stuff that I did in my professional work, right? And that was more important to me. But you can kind of use that same sort of system and kind of make it like, hey, look, this is like the work that I'm really happy about. This is my main portfolio. And then if you want to see like the silly experiments that I'm doing, like you can click on this folder over here. No, I definitely like the way you're saying it. It gives me a bit more confidence removing those now. Awesome. Yep. Good populace. Yeah, because like I said, the rest of it looks good, right? You're making a lot of progress in the material art department as well. You've got like 2 nice environments on here. And I think you were asking me if the presentation is better in the Beyond Extend one. Hmm. Okay, okay. Yeah, we got like a little trim sheet here. This is an interesting one, right? This is an interesting one because you mentioned it yourself here that this is like the least finished material here is this one, like in miscellaneous trim. Again, it's one of those things where if you already know yourself that it's like the least finished material, again, don't show it. Right? Because all the other stuff that you've shown above it kind of gets dragged down by well, firstly you saying that this is like the least finished material, and then the material itself also looking like it's the least finished one. So again, be very be very deliberate with the stuff that you put on your portfolio, and be very brutal with yourself, honest, right? Because if you put something like this, the least finished material here is this one, then I know that there was probably a doubt in your mind of even having it on your portfolio in the first place, right? But let's talk about the presentation, right? Also, love these bricks, man. Bricks looks cool. Has like a really nice graphical tone to it as well. So presentation for these guys, right? Okay. Kevin is also saying, I remember getting grilled in an interview over a very old piece, even though the rest of my portfolio was way higher quality. You always have to curate and prune your portfolio. Yeah, 100%. Yep. So presentation here, right? I think the main thing that can be improved here is that you show off like all the textures, right? So that would be like base color, roughness, normal. Just show all of it off. And what I kind of like the presentation as is. So probably take the next bit of advice as like more of a personal thing that I would do is I would again look at something contextual in your environment where you can like maybe even, I mean, change the camera angle up a bit, right? But let's imagine that this would be, wait, hold up. Let's make it a little bit more accurate. Let's imagine that this would be like your frame, right? And then you can see like, ooh, the nice shiny tiles next to it. And then you have like the texture breakdown of the tiles with like the 4 different materials, or I don't know if you do it like this, right? Whatever you want to do, because then like we're getting context and then the actual textures. But I also don't mind you doing this though. Like this looks very nice and clean, you know? If you then also add like the other textures to it too. I think one thing that I could possibly say is if you're doing these spheres, right? Well, these cylinders, think about the way that you're lighting them too. Because right now we have like, it's kind of hard to tell, like one main light, right? Like one main light source coming from here. But what you would probably want to do, if we draw like a little, this is the top of the cylinder, right? And this is the light source that you already have currently. What you could probably do is have like another light here and then add like a little rim light over here as well. It kind of gives like the edges like a little bit of a highlight. And then you just have like another light here. Might not even need this one, but just like to kind of cancel out like some of the shadows that we're getting here. So you would probably have like lit up area, and then like a stroke of like slight shadow, and then like some edge highlights as well from the light coming from the back of it too. I could possibly like elevate it to the next level too, and then tiny nitpick. Give this like a tiny more space. Yeah, like a tiny more space. I tried to replicate the way Vincent Desrosiers did it with his materials in Immortals Phoenix Rising. Yeah, I can't recall specifically what he did with his presentation, right? But I think if you're taking him as like an example, I think you're definitely on the right track. Yeah. I think in your case, right, you gotta be somewhat cognizant of, and this is in general, right, not you specifically, but he obviously has like a lot more experience, right? So you're not gonna see like thorough breakdowns from seniors compared to juniors, right? Because they don't really need to do that stuff anymore. Some seniors still do, right? Like some seniors still have like very specific breakdowns, and they break down everything into detail. But you're probably gonna see less of it the more you experience you gather. Yeah, so let's have a look here. Let's do a little recap. Yes, first one, probably the biggest one that we talked about, right, is remove old work. That's the biggest one, right? And like being objective with yourself. That's definitely the biggest one. Yeah, just the top row, you know, like the 4 top pieces, that would be great for me. Like the rest of it, like I don't really mind that much. Number 2. Let me think. What else did we say? Oh yeah, breakdowns, right? Oh, maybe the point that we made all the way in the beginning, where you have to, especially about this post, right? This post in specific, like it seems to me that you're more trying to sell a pack, right? Which I know that you're trying to do that. But I think the better way to sell it is to then make something cool with it, and then have people like click on it that way, right? Sell, let's call it sell with art, right? So you make like a cool piece of art, and then if people are interested in getting those rocks as well, and like making something as awesome as you're doing, then you drive people to do sales. Because right now it feels more like it's just purely made for sales rather than a presentation. Was a very helpful little tip I wasn't expecting to get. Yeah, I've gone through the ringer like a couple of times as well with trying to sell stuff, and yeah, I wouldn't buy my older stuff either. Let's call it that. And then number 3, let's see, what else did we discuss? Oh yeah, breakdowns, right? Breakdown improvements. I think honestly, there could also be, there's a little bit of room to do like some improvements on your thumbnails as well, right? I'm a big fan of having like a thumbnail, like a consistent thumbnail. I love to see that in other people's work as well. So what I mean by that is if you do something like very minimalistic, right, where you just have like the little helmet and then maybe like the program things in here and then like a bold font, right? I would honestly say like try to kind of follow that kind of very bold, like outspoken style, right? Where you can have like the same sort of framing, and then you just call it like Sky Island, like with 2 rows here, right? And then do the same thing here with like Market of Wonders, right? Like, or team challenge or something like that. So you get like a little bit of consistency between all of the thumbnails. How you kind of style it, that's kind of like your own thing that you can get creative with, right? I'm more of a fan of like relatively minimalistic stuff, something that is a bit less impactful on the thumbnail. But I think what you can also do is have like a thumbnail that has like a very minimalistic style in the beginning, so that the focus is more on the actual artwork, right? Because that's always going to be what is attracting to people, right? Where they can see like a cool piece of art and then they'll want to click on it. And then for the sake of consistency, let's say after a first week, when most of the people have seen the stuff that you did, right? Then you can update the thumbnail, because no one's gonna like, or like, it's gonna be less likely that people are just gonna stumble on your work on the front page. It feels like I'm kind of talking about YouTube now, right? Where you have to do like a lot of A/B testing with your thumbnails and update it like every week. I don't know. It's something that you could try. I'm not doing that myself, right? But I think if you go for something that's very bold and is kind of detracting from the art, I think you have to be more specific about how you approach that compared to something minimalistic. Yeah. That's all I say. All I got to say, Lazar. Thank you so much for putting your work up as well. I appreciate it, and best of luck with the next pieces coming up. Awesome. Let's see. Next up, we're definitely not doing good on time, but we might extend this session for a little bit. Okay. Nicolas Ortiz. Environment artist. Love to see it. Student at Adelphi University. Studying computer science. Cool. Currently working as 3D applications instructor at ID Tech Camps. That's awesome. I've been engaging in environment art using Radiant Black Edition on the T7 engine. Oh my god, I have no clue what that is. It's probably like mod tools, right? But yeah. Thanks so much. We'll get to work on it ASAP. That's awesome. Oh, Adam. Oh. Hurts. It hurts. Modding. Let's have a look. So let me get some additional context here, right? Because I think context in terms of modding is going to be more important. Various areas of Blood of the Dead, a zombie game mode level. All level environmental design was done by myself. Okay, so BSPs, texture libraries, model libraries, and in-engine lighting were all used to develop the environment. Okay, so it was mainly just just the level design and the environment design, right? So like the asset placement, you didn't really get to create your own assets for this. Yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting because this takes me a bit more to like actual game dev, right? Because this is like level design and environment art like coming together in like one person. This is great to see. I think what I would love to see with something like this is people actually, or like yourself, actually playing like a match on your level, right? So that we can get an idea of how the look and feel of something like this works. In my opinion, that always sells like a level, right? An actual gameplay level really well. But I'd love to see it from time to time. Yeah, I think honestly, this is the first time that we actually have had a modder on portfolio reviews, I think. Because yeah, like, this is all looking cool, right? But the thing why I say that like a video would really sell this is because level design comes first, right? Like the functionality and the gameplay, even though like it hurts me to say that, like always comes first over the art. Yeah, stuff here looks cool though. Plus, it would also help give me an idea of how this actually like connects to each other as well. This is also coming from a place where I don't really have an idea about like any Call of Duty, right? So I've never really played like a Call of Duty game. I have no additional context that could like help me kind of recognize like how the environment is made and such. This is going to be like a different kind of review. Let's see. All assets showcased were modeled in Blender and textured in Substance Painter. Awesome. Okay, so this is all made by yourself then, I'm assuming. Okay, no. So the rest of the scene was developed using BSBs, texture libraries. Okay. Cool. That's awesome, by the way. Like being very specific about like the context, right? Saying that, hey, all assets showcase were modeled in Blender. I wanted to focus on like modular assets and I can see which ones are made, right? And also like that the sandbags were also crafted by yourself too. It's cool. Yeah, honestly, like very applicable stuff here. Got some normal issues here. I'm not going to dive into the art too much though. Let's see. Okay, this is great, right? The amount of content that's in here and like the amount of assets and breakdowns and pictures that is in here is great. I think it's a little too much. And what you could do is you could kind of condense like a lot of the information into like more condensed images, right? Or even single images. Let's see if we can have like an example of that. So these 4 images are basically all about the staircases, right? Where if you want to condense like all this information, what would be interesting if you have like a layout of one picture. It's gonna be again fairly straightforward, right? And you try to like condense like all the assets into like one area. And then you take the other half of it to then let's see. Let's try to see what works here. So these are your textures then, right? And then maybe what you could do under here is have like wireframes of some of the assets as well. And then do like a little poly budget over here, like how many polys it's gonna be. Just so that we can get everything into like the one singular image, right? And if we then start applying like this sort of like packing technique, let's call it, right, where we condense some of these images, we're gonna end up with like way less images that are gonna be way more informative in the way that you're gonna be presenting the information towards like people that are potentially want to hire you. Because yeah, like a lot of this stuff, like this could even be like cut out and like put right next to it. And then you have like the assets right next to it. And then also the textures, right? Can definitely be heavily condensed. Cool. Oh, the edges as well. Okay. So this is an interesting one, right? Because I think logically, you're trying to show off like the modular pieces first. And then we have a section all the way down there, which is more focused on like the individual props, right? But I think it could be way more impactful that you have like the overview, like the main image first, right? Where you're trying to sell us what you did. And then you have an overview of exactly what you did, like the assets that you've made, right? So that we can get like a really clear image of like, okay, this is all the stuff you made. That's great. Now I can pay attention to those assets. And then maybe see the difference between what you created and what you didn't make, right? Because it's getting very confusing where you're saying it's almost like this is my project, right? This is what I did, and these are the assets that I made. And I'm like, oh, okay. But then like this stuff is not really included, so it's kind of confusing. And I think if you can make it more clear that you can just say like, hey, look, this is like a presentation of all the stuff that I made, and then break them down, that would be like a more clearer way of presenting the information. Okay, awesome. This is really interesting stuff though. Like really interesting to see. I'm gonna bring it up, but I'm not gonna go into details. Make sure that you optimize the resources that are given to you, right? This is gonna be very important in game development. But when we see like a UV like this, where let's say like 70% is unused, that is like a big red flag. Because I mean, resources are getting more available than ever, but still it's really important that we as game environment artists know how to optimize the resources that we get and then put them into the game again. So yeah, just watch out for this. Something to take into account for the next project perhaps, or maybe you can take like a bunch of the assets that you've made and that kind of logically work together and then put them on like a texture sheet together. Or even cut this in half, right? And do like a 2x1 texture where you have like a 1K by 512 or something like that. You can kind of like cut this in half. There's options here, right? There's always options. It's just so that you're aware that this is something that is pretty important to pay attention to. Hi Grassland, we might get to your question in a little bit. I'm gonna see if we can round off this like little portfolio, then maybe we can discuss it a little bit. But yeah, I think this is great though. I think it could also be nice to showcase like more angles of the environment, right? I don't know if there are more, but it seems like there are. So be interesting to showcase. And if not, you're doing a very good job of convincing me that there's more to it. No, okay, this was very interesting. I think I like what I'm seeing already, right? So we're seeing a transition from only using the tools that are available and not really creating anything new, and then jumping into the next step where you are going to be creating your own stuff. There was some things that we can definitely talk about, right? There's definitely more polish, but other than that, like, I love the moves that you're making already. I'm just very excited to see where you're gonna take it next, right? If the goal is to become like an environment artist, you're definitely taking the right steps already. And I love that you're using like the modding tools to kind of like incorporate your unique stuff and then blend it with like stuff that already exists. Yeah, so that's great. So a little recap here then is I think honestly like the main biggest point is condensing information. Condensing information, right? The second thing would be, and this is not something that we discussed while looking at it, but try to incorporate like a little bit of story into it, right? Story is very important to something like this. There were kind of hints of it, right? Yeah, it's going to be interesting how you use the tools that you're given, right? Like oftentimes you're working with like a very limited tool set. Well, not very limited. You have like the models and the textures and all that stuff. But it's always interesting to then see that those tools in the hands of a level artist who's going to then tell stories with it, right? So I think that would be like the next step to kind of start thinking about is like how you're going to incorporate like a more specific story in the stuff that you're going to be doing next. And then number 3, I think as a next step would probably be something where I kind of want to see you do like an individual prompt where you take a little bit more time and take it a bit further rather than using like a smart material, right? I think that would be like a very interesting next step. Like just a simple individual asset that kind of shows that you can well, I kind of know that you can model, right? But then also showing that you can bake something down, get a nice texture going, like paying attention to all the layering that a texture has, and yeah, showcasing that you can do like the full execution of like a single asset. Again, keep it small, right? Like don't overthink it. Like don't try to make something that's super like visually impressive. Just something that could convince me and everyone else that's looking at your portfolio of like, hey, look, you can do like the full asset pipeline. That's awesome. Yeah. No, very interesting to look at. Very interesting to look at. Yeah, I think those are the 3 things that I would say, right? Where currently with your current work, definitely condensing the information is the most important one out of these 3. Yeah, I'm honestly just curious where you're gonna take it next, you know? Like, it's gonna be great to follow along. So thank you for posting your work. Thank you for posting your work, Nicholas. And yeah, keep it up. Ask questions in the community. Like if there's anything that I can do to help as well, reach out to me. Let me know. Awesome stuff. Keep it up. I think... yeah, I think we might do one more. Let's see. I'm sorry, but I think we're just gonna stick with Magnus this time around. Before we do that though, let's have a look at the chat. Because Grassland Studio is asking, I'm a concept artist, but sometimes in my free time I design large maps for a video games company. I do use pre-existing assets, but is this a skill, a full-time job in game development? I ask because I'm not sure if level designer is the same job type, or if you have also want to be a modeler. So that's a thing that I did in my previous job, right? Like I was a level artist, even though my official title was environment slash prop artist. Most of the time I would spend using pre-existing assets and then telling like uh, a story in like a location and then doing like terrain work and all that kind of stuff surrounding it too. However, I do not think that it is a good idea or do not recommend just only using that um as like a skill that you want to do, right? So what you bring up where you also have to be a modeler, there were lots of moments where I still had to be, right? And I still had to know the pipeline. So yeah, I would definitely say that you can kind of use that skill, but you still need to showcase that you can model your own things, that you can build your own trim sheets, build your own textures, all that kind of stuff too. It just also for setting yourself up for the future, like it makes you more versatile and well-rounded too. So it's a win-win. Then when it comes to a level designer, they focus on like something completely different. Like a level design is focused on the actual gameplay of a location, where like a level artist is more about making that level look pretty, right? So usually the way that works is a level designer comes in, they build a gameplay space, and then once they're done, you then transition in and kind of start dressing up like the gameplay space that they've made. But they focus on like a complete different set of parameters that we focus on, because we focus on making things pretty. They focus on making things functional and fun to play. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Last one for tonight. We got Magnus. And Magnus had a couple of questions. So let's have a look at the chat here. Hey, I would love to get a portfolio review. I'm close to 4 years in my career. I'm currently working as an art lead. I do feel my portfolio lacks quality. I've received that feedback from others as well. Trying to update my portfolio over the next months. I'm also unsure what to do about my professional category. Okay. Let's see. A lot of work that I've done is very early in production and therefore it's not polished. I'll revisit some of my personal projects. I'll remove some pieces, but I would love to know which ones. So your goal is to be more hireable by AA and AAA studios. Okay, so this is an interesting one because I kind of had to have a look at your stuff before. Because you come at me with an interesting proposition, right? Because it seems that most of your stuff is like really catered towards more stylized feel. It's very interesting. Let's take it step by step. Let's do it a little bit different in your case and just go through the questions, and then I'll see if we can do like a portfolio review. So the first thing that you say is that your portfolio lacks quality. I think that sort of goes hand in hand with what you say later on as well, where a lot of your work is kind of done in very early production, right? Especially like the Atmosphere seems to be stuff that is yeah, it kind of has like prototype or like experimentation, and like all this stuff is like very early in its development, right? So of course, like people are going to build up this perception that a lot of it is not to final quality yet, because it's kind of being sold to them art wise as like being a prototype, right? So I think the perception there can be skewed a little bit as well. Even though I don't think that's necessarily true. Yeah, and then like the second thing was that you were trying to be more focused on environment arts with a better presentation as well. Yeah, I honestly think that this is also a case where you could really drastically increase your chances by sticking to like certain style, right? It seems like there's like lots of different style influences here, which could be good, but there's just some stuff. I'm trying to decide if it's something that's personal to me or not. That's what I'm currently struggling with, right? Because you'll have to take this with a caveat as well that I dominantly focus on like the realistic side of things, right? So my view on stylized is going to be a little bit different and a little bit less refined, if you want to say it like that. Because I feel like from like a quick thumbnail look, right? Like some stuff like really works well. Like I love like a bunch of these pieces and they really sell well. But then we get to this one and I know the inspiration, right? Because we kind of had a look into community as well. I just feel like it's and I know that you're updating this one currently, right? But it kind of feels like this is just like a weird one in terms of like style, currently. So in the lineup here, I feel the thing that you need to do currently is just curate. Like curate exactly what you want to show off and what you think is still going to be relevant to the job that you would enjoy doing, right? I think that's going to be like the main component here. Because I don't think like the atmosphere stuff like is bad, right? Like there's some interesting stuff in here. Yeah, you could. Yeah. Yeah, this is the thing, right? Like so like the level of finish ranges a lot because obviously you're doing prototypes, right? So I feel that with the atmosphere stuff, you know what you're presenting, right? Because the awesome stuff is usually at the top, and then the more you scroll down, the better the not the better, like the worse the quality gets. So yeah, I think it's really first of all curating like your portfolio itself, and then curating the artwork that's going to be inside of like the post that you make as well, right? And being like very specific with what you show off. That would already like help a lot here, I think. And let's see, because you also wanted to know about like your professional category, right? Yeah, which is mostly like the atmosphere stuff. There's some concept art and paint overs in here as well, which look cool. You have this guy. This guy looks awesome, by the way. I love the look of him. So good. Looks awesome. These all look cool, you know? I think again, it's the way that you present stuff makes like a huge difference, right? Like you almost have to kind of sell it as like yeah, like early screenshots, right? And like really curate like what you show off with this sort of stuff, right? And like maybe do like more breakdowns as well, right? And like being really transparent about it too. Um This is cool. Yeah. Yeah, just having a look through these posts, like I think honestly, like the biggest thing where the perception of people looking at your portfolio is that it's not quality enough, right? Is because yeah, it's not finished yet, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Like 100%. Feels like you should at least see one picture of the game view or like context. Yeah. Yeah, like especially with this sort of stuff, right? Like the props where you can kind of see it like in the person's hands or something like that. That could definitely add like a lot of cool context as well. I think then going to what you wanted to do, right? Like being more hireable by like AA and AAA studios. If we then go back to, I know we're jumping around a little bit, because I'm trying to figure this out as well, because you got like a very unique portfolio as well. But what I think is really gonna help with becoming more hireable for like a AA or AAA studio is that you really curate your portfolio, and that like from the get-go we can see like, oh, okay, you're interested in this sort of game, this sort of style, awesome. We know 100% that you're a fit, or we know 100% that you're not a fit, right? And for that, I would look at like, what are some studios that you would love to work at, right? Like have a look at those studios and see how your profile kind of relates to those studios too, right? I'm not saying that you have to curate your work specifically towards the studio, right? But it could be interesting to give you like additional context for what you're currently missing in your portfolio compared to the work that they're putting out as a studio. Because yeah, yeah, the atmosphere stuff is really interesting. Because I'll be open, right? Like I kind of want to say that this could almost be like, this could all be one post. You could condense like a lot of the information here by, you know, just like really optimizing like all the information that's on display. Because this could all be a video, right? Like all the variations, like all the different layers on top of it, that looks awesome. But it can easily be like a video where you kind of show like the variations. It kind of has like a little turntable where you kind of like the thing is just rotating, right, as you're doing like the adjustments to it. Make it like nice and presentable, like in game. Could be awesome. And then you could kind of do that and make like one atmosphere post, and call it like atmosphere prototyping, and just add like a bunch of stuff in there, right? Or maybe say like atmosphere prop prototyping and do like all the different props in there, and it could have like atmosphere character prototyping and add like the creatures and the character together. Because what I'm trying to do with this, right, like as I'm trying to explain it, is I'm trying to condense the amount of posts that are gonna be about the same sort of stuff, right? So that we can kind of go through your portfolio and get like an idea of all the stuff that you've been doing, in like a condensed manner, right? Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be like a very atypical review, I would say. Because yeah, that's why I'm kind of keeping to like the very high level approach of things, right? Because one thing that I also try to be like very conscious of is that I don't say something that is gonna put you in a corner and has well, forces you to change your ways, right? Because I think that your artistic style is awesome. I think you're you have like a sort of consistency, like a through line through your work, right? Which would be like really amazing to kind of keep. And then you'll just have to find like a very specific studio that kind of wants to kind of hire you for that, right? And that means that, for example, like if we stick to like an actionable thing, right? Like the atmosphere stuff and like this stuff. Why is ArtStation so? Let's see. We can do this in like a big overview, right? So this is awesome. What I would do is I would condense the atmosphere to like 3 posts, two or 3 posts, right? Let's imagine that like this stuff over here like is gone. Right, but you kind of condense all that information into like a couple of posts, right? So we have like 2 atmosphere posts. We have this post. Let's see. This one is good. These 2 are good. I would say this one is kind of goes to like a different folder. Because it is cool to see, right? I love that you can also do concept work, which is going to be really valuable for making your Switch as well, right? But the way that I would do it is probably put it into like another folder where you can say concepts or something like that, right? I don't really have an idea what this one is. Let me just have a quick peek. Yeah, so these are also concepts, right? That's awesome. I would put that in like the same folder as this one. So move that in the same folder. I would remove this one. I know that you're working on it, right? But I would remove this one for now. That one. Huh. This one. I don't think from like just looking at your work, right? I haven't looked at this one specifically. It's gonna keep up, like hold up to like the other work, right? I'm gonna have a quick look. I know that this is super messy. Yeah, this looks awesome, right? If you look at the attention to detail just from the thumbnail, right? From this guy compared to this guy. Like I would rather see your portfolio filled with more of this stuff compared to this stuff. I know I'm being very, very blunt with this, right? But I'm also kind of gonna see what this does to your portfolio. Yeah, so something like this. What I was thinking. You can kind of see that like the stuff that we have left over like is more curated towards like a different style, right? Or like the same kind of style if you look at them all in comparison, right? So it's very clear that, hey, look, this is a style that I want to be doing 100%. And it's kind of very curated towards yeah, it's like a more curated portfolio. That's the way that I would approach this. And it's also like it's curating your portfolio in terms of like what the weakest things are, right? And honestly, most of it just going by the thumbnail too, right? So yeah. I definitely think that like curation is the first step here. 100%. Actually have a look at it. Yeah. Was it 3 years ago? Yeah, but this is super interesting, right? So these are even from like the same space and time. But I can just tell that you had like way more fun with something like this compared to something like this, right? Even though it still looks good, right? But there's like something about it where I can just tell that you just had like a lot of fun with this, you know? I would dive into that more. I know a very atypical review, right? But I think most of it comes down to curation, right? Because the work here is on that's on display looks really good. I think the perception that people have where it's not about like the quality is because you haven't really done the curation bit of your portfolio like very intently, right? So once you do that, I think you're onto like a winner here. Then the second part would be give yourself a I don't want to say give yourself a goal, but like look at studios that kind of align with where you want to be, right? Because that's also going to be like very indicative of the work that you need to be doing, right? Not that you need to make make like a portfolio like 100% curated towards that studio either, right? But I'll give like a very stupid example, right? Let's say that you want to get into Naughty Dog, right? Like I'm trying to give like a very black and white example. If you want to get into Naughty Dog, if that is like your thing, you know that your work is obviously not going to be made for that studio, right? So you'll have to either change the studio that you want to be working for, or change up the work as well. I know it might sound like a really stupid example, right? But sometimes that's like an interesting way of looking at it. So yeah, looking for studios as like a guideline, right? And what are they looking for? Because I think especially in like the stylized realm, depending on what kind of stylization we're talking about, right, and what kind of approach, you're also gonna have to have like a different skill set, which is also really important. Why I didn't want to get rid of like the concepts that you've done, right? Because I think they lend you like a really big boost when it comes to showing off that you can work in the studio that is going to lean into those skills a bit more compared to a realistic style studio, right? Yeah, that's what I would say. It's going to be like a little bit more of a weird one, but I'm just going to leave it there. Magnus, if you wanna reach out after, if there was something unclear, let me know. Because I know that this was like a very atypical review, right? So let me know if that was helpful or not. Yeah. And thanks again for posting your work. Appreciate it. And see, there was a question about like working for a specific studio as well, right? So Bobo was asking, is it reasonable to create a tailor-made environment specific for a specific position at a company after seeing the position opening? Yeah, and Scott is saying exactly what I was going to say as well. So the position might be closed by the time that you create a piece, right? It doesn't hurt in general, like Scott is saying. You never know what might happen, right? I'm even though I just mentioned it like in Magnus's portfolio, right? I'm generally like not a big fan of working towards a style specifically for a studio because you never know what happens, right? Games and the games industry, we've all seen it, right? Like crazy stuff happens. So that's why I'm generally like not really a big fan of catering your work towards a specific studio, because you never know what happens. Yeah. So I would say in the large sense, probably not a good idea to like cater your work to a specific studio. But like the opposite point to that is, let's say you get very specific, right? Let's say let's pick like a very specific thing, like the WoW art style. If you're going to be building in that sort of art style, that doesn't mean that your work is not going to be relevant to like another studio either, right? Sure, the workflow might change a little bit and you'll have to use like different programs or a different style, but it doesn't mean that if you cater your portfolio towards like a certain studio, that other studios don't see the value in your. So yeah. That being said, it doesn't really hurt, but I would probably still avoid working in like a specific style. For me, I think the biggest reason is because I mean, most of you all here are artists, right? And I think art is like a very personal creative expression. So then working towards like fitting in with a studio, like you're gonna have to do that regardless of your own style anyway. So might as well just have fun with it, you know? Like explore your own things and like explore what you want to do. Hey Varun Nair, thank you so much for trying to get access to the Discord. I think that's a good way of wrapping it up. I think if you want to get access to the Discord and if you want to be a part of like these portfolio reviews in the future, go and head on over to beyondlexington.com, where you can get access to the Discord. People that become community members also get access to like a massive PDF with like environment art tips, and we also host like a ton of other cool stuff too. Go check that out. I think that's gonna do it for tonight. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. Thank you so much for all the people that were involved with posting their work, having their portfolio reviews. Like really appreciate it. And yeah, it was awesome to be able to look through the work. I just want to say, I know that I'm generally just focused on giving feedback, right? But like generally impressed by like the work that people have on their portfolios and the breadth of work that I get to see. It's always amazing. Oh, Simon, you just signed up for the Patreon. That's awesome. Looking forward to everything. It's great to have you. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for your time, Mr. Dries. Oh, so formal, Leonardo. That's so weird. No worries. Yeah, that's it for me, people. Thank you so much for being here. Have an awesome evening. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow for feedback.